coronavirus just like stop coronaing? Hi, my name is Caitlin. Welcome back to my channel. I'm the Flutey Feminist, and each week I consult my Instagram followers to choose a video topic. I was supposed to do this topic anyways this week, but as you may have seen, I threw in an extra video on Monday where I gave suggestions, mostly podcasts, for like activities to do while you are at home doing the social distancing thing. But I still wanted to put out like a regular video this week. I know I usually do Thursday, but I decided to do Friday instead. How are you? I hope you're doing okay. I really hope you're doing okay. I'm doing okay. Financially, I think we're all gonna be not great coming up, but I'll survive. I hope you survive. Yeah. So we'll just dive into this topic and try to remain sane. I wrote about this topic, the topic of gendered languages, on my blog a year and a half ago, and it's something that I wanted to make a video on and discuss again. So I think it's really important to talk about how gender affects our language and shapes our culture, and how it affects the LGBTQ+ community specifically. That's something that I care a lot about. A little bit of background: I am fluent in both English and French. My dad is more Anglophone, my mom is more Francophone, so I learned both languages since I was born, basically. Of course, I sound like an Anglophone. I don't have a French accent, and I'd say in French I don't really have an English accent, but I use English way more in my everyday life, and culturally I feel like my background and personality is more rooted in Anglophone culture and North American culture, just because I grew up in a part of Montreal that was more Anglophone, basically. Even though I knew French from my mom and learned French at school, every day I still just spoke English 98% of the time. But I noticed over the years that French, of course, is a gendered language, meaning that all nouns are given a gender, either feminine or masculine. And so you would conjugate verbs as well, certain verbs, with feminine or masculine, and with the nouns you use words like le or la, where in English there's no gender, it's just the or a or something. So all nouns in French have a gender. And in terms of pronouns, there is no such thing as they or them in French. It's still just either a masculine or feminine pronoun to designate a group of people. And so, I think it's important to kind of think about all the grammar and vocabulary rules that there are, and how it affects the language and how it reinforces the patriarchy, basically. Hi trolls, I see you. I know I'm gonna have at least like one annoying comment under this video. Welcome. I'm probably just gonna laugh at you, so anyways, so I don't think that language is arbitrary. I think it's constructed with intentions in mind, and I don't think that the nouns in the French language are gendered arbitrarily, even though of course there are some words that it doesn't really matter, like the word for an apple, like une pomme, the fact that it's feminine. I don't think there's that much thought behind it, but you never know. But I still think in general there are reasons why the language is what it is. So, and I don't think that grammatical rules are arbitrary as well. There is one rule in particular that really shocks me now, because when I was in school and I learned it, I didn't bat an eyelash. I was like, yeah, okay. And so this rule is with regards to designating a group. So as I mentioned before, there's no such pronoun as they in French. So there's just him and her, or il or elle, basically. And so you just make those two pronouns plural if you're designating a group rather than an individual. And so I was taught the rule is that if you're designating a group of only women, you of course use the plural pronoun of elle. And then if you're designating a group of only men, you would use, of course, the plural pronoun of il. But then, so what do you do when it's a mixed gendered group of people that you're talking about? Well, basically, as long as there's one man in the group that you're talking about, you use the masculine pronoun. So if you're referring to a group of people in which there's one man and 1 billion women, to refer to them, you use il, the masculine plural pronoun. So it's not about the majority of whichever gender, no, because that would make too much sense, right? No, it's just about men, right? If there's a man present, automatically it's the masculine pronoun. That's what I was taught. And I can't believe that it took me like 10 years to realize how absurd that is, basically. It's literally the rule seeks to erase women. Literally. Think about it. One man against this is my example. One man against 1 billion women is still referred to in the masculine. What? Anyways, basically, the rule emphasizes the fact that one man is still of the utmost significance in our world, right? Along those lines, it's the same in English, where in French people will refer to like humankind as so man or men, right? And we kind of still have that in English. I feel like people don't say it as much as they still do in French when referring to humankind, which is very annoying. Another thing is that people will use the word for all or everybody in French would be tous, and that would be the masculine, and the feminine is toutes with an S at the end. So, but again, if it's the same rule, as long as there's one man that you're like referring to, you only use tous. And even then, like when you get emails addressed, for example, for like school related things, like I don't know, but it's always a masculine pronouns and prepositions or whatever you call them that are used. It's just always like that, and it's very frustrating. Now, another rule that I learned is how to create masculine and feminine versions of the same word. So basically, a lot of the time, this context would be for professions or jobs, careers, that sort of thing. So I was taught that you would take the masculine version of a word, and for the most part, you add the letter E to the end, and you get the feminine version. Sounds kind of innocuous, but how come we didn't learn that you take the feminine version of the word and you remove the E and it becomes masculine? I know it can sound like, who cares? But my point in this video is just to convey that like, these things are not like accidental. This is like on purpose. And the way that language is taught when it's a gendered language like French, it matters and it influences our culture. We could also just like not gender anything, like hello, like those languages exist. That's another option. But anyways, it's infusing sexism through language, and because it's language is taught with a set of rules and it all seems very methodical and everything, we kind of just accept it. It's like, yeah, okay, makes sense, you just need to find a good way to convey the language, etc. Anyways, but I find that words have so much power to shape our world. And the worst part, as I mentioned before, is that I really didn't even like blink or think at all when I was learning this stuff. It truly, when I think back, I'm like shocked at how much I was just like, yeah, sure, good way to remember these things, I guess. Also, like, there's no audible difference between a lot of these professions, like professeur and professeur with an E at the end sounds the same. So it's like, why gender these things anyways? another rule that really pisses me off is basically how there are different meanings for the masculine and feminine versions of the same noun. So this kind of goes along with the rule I just discussed, but basically some nouns, again, most likely due to like an identity or profession or status, they don't have the same meaning when you refer to the masculine one as to the feminine one. So for example, for a word like professeur, which means teacher, yes, professeur and professeur with an E, whatever, they mean the same thing. But for example, and this is the same in English, so I understand, but for example, maître and maîtresse in the vernacular do not have the same meaning. So, like in English, maître is master, so whatever, master, doesn't matter what of, and maîtresse or mistress means someone who is cheating on their husband, basically, right? So I tried really hard when I was writing this blog post to find this video that I had watched that kind of inspired me to write the blog post, because it was a video in French that gave you like 100 examples of this concept where it's like someone said the masculine version of a noun and then the feminine version meant something basically completely different nowadays. And basically the whole concept was that there's like 100 ways to call a woman a slut, basically, is what the main difference in meaning was. So it was like a lot of noun, like a lot of words meant to convey status or a profession or whatever that was like respectable, like maître, master, meant in the feminine version meant something like a loose, gross, whatever woman, right? So that like really bothers me. But again, that's not just like, well, whatever, that's just how it is. No, like decisions were made and like meaning has been infused in all these rules, and it gets, you know, thrown into our culture and becomes part of what we accept as normal, and it becomes part of our story in our head of how we conceive of what a man is and what a woman is, etc. Now, furthermore, why does that matter? We get it. Our culture is sexist, so is some of our language, of course. Now, this whole time I've been speaking about a language, French, which only has two gender designations. It's binary. It has masculine and feminine. So of course, to me, that's a really big issue, because there are not simply two genders. Yes, I said it for the trolls. I'll say it again. There are not only two genders. Okay? Okay. And because of that, I think obviously of the LGBTQ plus community, specifically non-binary people who are not women or men, and a language such as the French language literally erases that fact, and erases them, and kind of serves as a microaggression when they have to use a language that they're erased from, basically. So how do we make a binary language gender inclusive? I don't know the exact answer, but some things I've seen over the last few years have been interesting and hopeful. For example, there are some additions or combinations of words that people have come up with in French. For pronouns, for example, pronouns, there's il and elle for him and her, and they've combined those two to make IEL, I-E-L, I think, or maybe with the L-E at the end as well, I'm not sure, but at least I-E-L, to combine the two and be gender inclusive, or to use if you're non-binary, I believe. And then, of course, there's also combinations of word endings to include the genders and whether it's plural or not. So, for example, the word for everyone or all would be tous for masculine, toutes with an S at the end for feminine. And people have decided to combine the two, tous with a dot kind of in the middle, again, to be inclusive. Or, for example, when you're conjugating an adjective that follows a noun, for the word beautiful, which would be jolie, J-O-L-I, You can also add .e, .s to be inclusive of the feminine version and the plural version if you need to, but at least, of course, the two genders, which I think is huge, and it's really important for people to make that effort to not erase people, but already, as you can tell right now, it's just combinations that again are simply just about feminine and masculine pronouns or word endings. It's still not something new that could make non-binary people feel seen and included in that language. So I don't know, how to go and conjugate or come up with words that are not simply combining masculine and feminine, but that are creating something new. I'm not sure. But we do need like a huge makeover for languages such as French, where there's only binary genders, or genders at all, because it should not be the case. But anyways, in August of 2018, I went to a panel during Pride Week, and the people on the panel were talking basically about this topic, the role of gender in language. And on the panel, most people spoke French. And what was interesting, someone on the panel noticed that a lot of the time, the people on the panel would use certain terms in English as they were speaking in French, because, like, for whatever reason, the English language has evolved to just include so many more terms for the LGBTQ plus community, whereas French has not by any means caught up. So there were so many things that they had to say in English because there was no words for them yet in French, which I think is really sad. They noticed that French is such a restrictive and less evolved language, basically. And also, they spoke about how in the French community or Francophone community, there's pushback at the notion of like making up words to be gender inclusive. And it's like, pretty sure language in general is made up. It comes from our brains, and over the centuries we have decided which words mean what and how to spell them and how to change the spelling. Language evolves, language changes. Even just 10 years ago, we had probably 1,000 less words to use. And of course, over the centuries, the way people speak and how certain things are spelled are changed literally every day, right? So it makes absolutely no sense to be upset that we need language to change for a very important reason, right? It's not just so we can include new technology or whatever, or make Google into a verb. This is to recognize people's identities and who they are, and have it be reflected in the language that they use, right? I can't imagine being a Francophone who is non-binary and the language they have to use doesn't even include their identity. To me, it's really, really awful. Language is human/man, because men suck and have taken control over so much in history, but it's human made, right? And if it's human made, it can be human changed too. It's a social construct. It's a very important one, right? It's a useful and important one, and it is linked, of course, to being a human being, right? But it's not set in stone. It has to evolve. And so how in English we have given names to things that have already existed, such as different genders, we need to do that in a language, again, such as French. We have to work together, especially in the Francophone community, of course, to make it inclusive, create new words, all that sort of thing. We have to really get language to stop reinforcing sexism and to stop being so male-centric, basically. The last thing I want to say is that, of course, I probably should have said that before starting this, I do know that there are languages that don't have gender, and of course there are languages that, like German, very famously, who have a third gender which is neutral, which I appreciate very much. I think that's very useful and makes sense. I can't remember in terms of pronouns. Yeah, I believe in pronouns as well, there's neutral. I took a year I took German for a year when I was in university, and I've lost a lot of it. But that's so great that there are literally at least 3 genders to refer to when you speak German and to use. So that's already a huge, huge advantage for such a language. So it is possible to be gender inclusive in language. It's important. We have to do that. French is whack. So is English. I know, trust me. But at the end of the day, at least the English language is not gendered in terms of like, in terms of like conjugating things, nouns and that sort of thing. I know, of course, yes, there are genders for pronouns, but anyways, there's the word they, blah, blah, blah. I'm gonna stop here. You probably wanna go scroll on your phone again. I get it, that's what I'm gonna do after this, cause the motivation right now is tanking. Thank you for watching. You can check out the blog post I wrote, which is basically the same content. I'll put it in the description box below. And leave a comment, let me know what you think, let me know which language you speak and if it's gendered or not, and what you think about that. What are some really interesting kind of rules or phenomena in your language that are similar or not similar or just interesting that you'd want to share? I would love to know. I love language. I think language is fascinating. Linguistics is fascinating. So I'm always interested to know about stuff like that. And make sure to like and share this video with your friends and family. I hope, again, that you're doing well during this time. And the fun fact for today, this is one of my favorite fun facts ever, is that the word for baby in German is baby. Picture this, okay? I'm sure you've all heard at least like a second of German in your lifetime. The word for baby is, they say the word baby in their language. To me, that is wild. I just can't picture. To me, it like does not go with the rest of the language. They're saying all these guttural things and there's all these pronunciation things that I worked on. It's hard to speak in German, and then all of a sudden, baby. Like, I just can't. I've never been able to like picture that as being something not funny. Like, it's just, to me, it's just really funny. So now you know. Anyways, make sure, of course, to subscribe to this channel for more content. I do normally post on Thursdays, so you can subscribe up there. My flute performance channel is right over here, and right up there is my latest video. Thank you so much for watching, and have a flutey feminist day. Bye!